The sky above the Wakhan corridor turns a particular shade of yellow-gray before a major storm. Not at sunrise, not at sunset. In the middle of the afternoon, when the light should still be clean and cold and bright. The herders who have worked these valleys for generations say that shade has no name in any weather forecast. It does not need one. They already know what it means. Every adult in the household sees it, reads it, and within minutes, the entire operation changes. Because when that sky appears over the Hindu Kush, you do not have hours. You may not even have one. The sheep are not yet in the pen. That is the problem. They are scattered across the high grazing floor, 400 meters above the winter village, moving slowly through the last thin patches of autumn grass. The temperature will not drop gradually tonight. It will fall off a cliff. And if those animals are still exposed when the blizzard arrives, not merely uncomfortable, not merely cold, but exposed to wind speeds that strip body heat faster than most people have ever experienced, then everything the family has built, saved, and survived on is at risk of dying in the dark. This is not a dramatic exaggeration. This is the arithmetic of survival in the Afghan mountain valleys. A flock of Karakul or Hazaragi sheep represents not just food and wool, but the collateral against an entire year of life. Lose the flock in a blizzard, and you do not just mourn. You face a winter without meat, a spring without fiber, a summer without the trading capital that keeps everything moving. In these valleys, the sheep are the economy. They are the pantry, the coat, the market, the future. And right now, the sky is turning that particular shade of yellow-gray, and they are still on the mountain. If you find yourself drawn to stories of human intelligence under pressure, the kind of quiet, practical genius that never makes headlines but keeps entire communities alive, then stay with us. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we document exactly these worlds every single week. What happens in the next few hours in that valley is not panic. It is the activation of a system so refined by centuries of trial and failure that it runs almost like a silent protocol. Each person has a role. Each action has a sequence. Each element of the landscape, the shelter, the animal behavior, and the accumulated knowledge of the family feeds into a single coordinated outcome. Get every animal inside before the storm arrives. But understanding why that is so difficult, and why the system that solves it is so much more sophisticated than it appears, requires starting not with the storm itself, but with the animal. The Karakul sheep is not a fragile creature. It evolved across the high plateaus of Central Asia, and its physiology carries the memory of harsh winters. Its wool, prized globally for its tight curl and insulating density, is not decorative. It is functional armor against cold. But that armor has a limit, and the limit is wind. Dry cold the Karakul manages with remarkable endurance. Cold combined with sustained wind penetration is another matter entirely. When wind reaches a certain speed and temperature simultaneously, even a healthy sheep in full winter coat begins to lose core heat faster than its body can generate it. The young, lambs born in autumn, which some families choose to keep alive through winter for next spring's flock, are the most vulnerable. They have the least body mass, the thinnest insulation, and no behavioral strategy beyond staying close to their mothers, who are themselves trying to survive. So the first pressure point in a pre-blizzard afternoon is not finding the sheep. It is the lambs. A shepherd moving fast across the high grazing floor in fading light, with the temperature already dropping and the first gusts beginning to arrive from the northwest, cannot simply drive the flock downhill. The lambs will fall behind. Some will panic and scatter. In rocky terrain, a small animal moving fast in low visibility can fall into a gap between boulders, twist a leg, or simply stop, standing still in shock while the storm builds around it. The shepherd knows this. The shepherd has known this since childhood. So the movement of the flock is not a chase. It is a choreography. The family elder, Usually a man or woman in their 50s or older does not run to the mountain. They position themselves at the lower end of the flock's territory, near the natural funnel point where the terrain narrows toward the trail. Their role is to hold that boundary, to be a human wall that prevents any animal from drifting sideways or downslope in the wrong direction. The younger herders, often teenagers or adults in their 20s, move in wide arcs above the flock, applying gentle pressure from behind and from the sides. The dogs, if the family has them, work the edges. This pattern, wide arc, gentle pressure, funnel point below, is not accidental. It is the product of generations of learning exactly how these animals respond to stress. Push too hard, and they scatter. Move too slowly, and the storm wins. The pace has to be precisely calibrated, and every person in the team reads the flock's body language continuously. There is a moment in this descent when the sheep recognize what is happening. It is visible in the way the flock's movement changes, a kind of collective shift in direction and urgency that herders describe as the animals understanding the threat. Whether this is true perception or simply a response to the atmospheric pressure drop and the changing wind, the practical effect is the same. The flock begins to move with the herders rather than against them. The lambs cluster tighter. The pace increases naturally. This is the moment the family hopes for, and the moment they have been working toward from the first sign of that gray-yellow sky. But arriving at the village is only the halfway point of the problem. The pen, the structure that will keep these animals alive through the night, is not simply a fence. In the high mountain villages of Afghanistan's remote valleys, the winter animal shelter is one of the most technically considered structures in the entire community, and most people, looking at it from the outside, would not guess that at all. From a distance, it looks like a rough enclosure built from stone and packed earth. Low walls, a heavy wooden beam across the entrance, a roof that appears improvised. But every dimension of that structure is a decision made in response to a specific survival constraint. The walls are thick, in many cases nearly a meter of compacted stone and clay, not for visual strength, but for thermal mass. Stone absorbs heat during the day, even on cold days, and releases it slowly through the night. A flock of 50 or 60 animals generates significant body heat collectively, and those thick walls trap that warmth inside the enclosure rather than letting it bleed into the frozen air. The temperature inside a properly sealed stone pen, even without any fire, can remain 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the outside air during a blizzard night. For a lamb born in October, that difference is the difference between waking up in the morning and not waking up at all. The roof is the element that surprises most. In these valleys, roofing material is not abundant. Timber is scarce, metal is expensive and rare, and manufactured materials are practically non-existent in the most remote settlements. What the families use instead is a layered assembly of wooden poles, dried grass or reeds, and a packed earth cap on top. This system, used across the mountain regions of Central Asia for thousands of years, works not despite its apparent simplicity, but because of its physics. The earth cap insulates against cold radiation from above. The grass layer creates a still air buffer, and still air is one of the most effective insulators that exists. The wooden poles distribute the structural load so that accumulated snow does not collapse the roof. Each layer solves a different problem. Remove any one of them, and the system degrades. Together, they form a roof that costs nothing in materials that cannot be found locally and performs comparably to modern insulated structures in the one metric that matters most: keeping living animals alive through the night. Now here is the detail that changes the entire picture. The pen is not designed only for the sheep. In many Afghan mountain households, the animals and the family share a thermal relationship that is deliberate, not incidental. The animal shelter is often built directly adjacent to, or even beneath, the family's winter living quarters. The heat rising from the flock overnight, the accumulated warmth of dozens of animal bodies breathing, moving, and digesting through the cold hours, passes through the floor or the shared wall and contributes meaningfully to the temperature of the space above. This is not a cultural accident born of poverty. It is a calculated thermal strategy that predates modern heating systems by centuries. The animals become a living furnace. The architecture is designed to harvest that heat rather than waste it. And the family, sleeping on raised platforms above or beside the animal space, benefits from a gentle, continuous warmth that requires no fuel, no fire, and no maintenance through the night. If you are watching this and realizing that what looked like a basic stone barn is actually an integrated heating and survival system, that is exactly the kind of hidden intelligence this channel exists to uncover. Like and subscribe if this is the kind of story you want to keep seeing. But back to the afternoon, because the storm is closer now. The flock has arrived at the lower slopes, and the first animals are entering the pen. This is another critical moment. Sheep do not file in calmly when they are agitated. They push, they stall, they crowd the entrance. If a lamb goes down in the crush and is stepped on, the injury can be severe enough to kill it within days, even if it survives the night. So the family manages the entry with practiced patience. The entrance is deliberately narrow, wide enough for one adult animal at a time, which forces the natural slowing that prevents crushing. The elder stands at the side, watching each animal as it passes, checking for limping, for labored breathing, for any sign of early cold stress. Animals showing those signs are noted and will be monitored through the night. Once the majority of the flock is inside, the head count begins. In a family flock, every animal is known, not just as a number, but as an individual with a recognizable face, a wool pattern, a behavioral tendency. The herders know which ewe tends to drift to the back of the flock. They know which lamb is the slowest. They know which animal panics at the entrance and needs to be guided in separately. This intimate knowledge is not sentimentality. It is data. It is the difference between closing the pen at the end of the count and realizing that one animal is missing, and knowing exactly which terrain that animal is likely still standing in, scared and alone, as the first snow begins to fall. That scenario happens, not every season, but enough that the family has a protocol for it. One adult, usually the most experienced herder, goes back up the slope. They carry a torch or a lantern, they know the terrain precisely, and they move fast. The mission is to locate the missing animal and bring it down before the storm makes the path impassable. This is not recklessness. It is the calculated acceptance of manageable risk to prevent a larger and certain loss. The time window is narrow. The herder knows it. The family waiting at the pen knows it. And when that lantern reappears out of the dark with the missing animal stumbling ahead of it, that moment carries a weight of relief that cannot be overstated. Meanwhile, inside the pen, the preparation continues. Fresh fodder, dried grass, hay, or whatever stored feed the family has preserved from the autumn harvest, is distributed across the floor. This serves two functions. It feeds the animals, maintaining their caloric reserves through a night when they will be burning energy just to stay warm. And it creates a layer of insulation between the animals and the stone floor, which even with its thermal mass can conduct cold upward and chill an animal resting directly on it. The bedding layer, thin as it may seem, adds a critical air gap between living bodies and cold stone. Again, the material is simple. The understanding behind its use is not. The water situation requires its own planning. In blizzard conditions, surface water freezes. The streams and small channels the flock drinks from during the day will be ice by morning. Some families maintain a small indoor storage vessel, a clay pot or a wooden container tucked against the warmest interior wall of the pen, that holds enough water to prevent the flock from going into the following day severely dehydrated. Dehydration in cold weather is counterintuitive to many people, but it is a real and serious threat. The cold suppresses the sensation of thirst in animals and humans alike, but the body's water needs do not decrease. A sheep that enters a blizzard night already slightly water deficient and emerges into a frozen morning with no access to liquid faces, a compounded physical stress that can push a marginally healthy animal into decline within 48 hours. The clay pot by the warm wall is not an accident. It is a quiet act of animal husbandry that reflects a precise understanding of what cold weather actually does to living bodies. By the time the pen is sealed for the night, the heavy wooden beam dropped across the entrance, the gaps in the wall stuffed with dried grass, the roof checked for any openings where wind could force its way through, the storm has arrived. The sound is immediate and total. Wind against stone walls, snow hissing through the darkness, the mountain transforming into something else entirely. Inside the pen, the animals settle. Their body heat rises. The temperature in the enclosure begins its slow climb away from the danger zone. The family retreats to their own quarters. In a traditional Highland Afghan household, the winter room is small and low, not because the family cannot build larger, but because a small space holds heat from a single hearth, with far greater efficiency than a large one. The room may be no more than 4 meters on any side. The walls are the same packed stone and clay as the pen below. The floor is covered with killams and thick woven mats. A small stove or brazier burns dried dung, the one fuel that is genuinely abundant in a pastoral community, and the heat it generates in that compressed space is enough to keep the room survivable, even when the outside temperature falls to -20 or beyond. The children sleep closest to the heat source. The elders position themselves near the door, where their lighter sleep allows them to monitor any sounds from the animal pen below. A sheep in distress, the sound of a structural problem in the roof, the particular noise that signals a predator has come close. Even in sleep, the family remains partly alert to the flock. The boundary between the human domestic space and the animal survival space is permeable in every direction, and that permeability is intentional. The family's safety and the flock's safety are not separate categories. They are the same category expressed in 2 different rooms. The night passes. The storm peaks somewhere in the early hours before dawn, when the wind reaches its maximum velocity and the snow accumulation on the roof becomes a structural concern. In older households, someone will rise in the dark and clear the roof with a wooden-handled scraper, working by feel as much as by sight, knowing the load tolerance of the roof from years of experience, removing snow before it exceeds what the structure was built to hold. This is not a dramatic rescue. It is maintenance. It is the same mundane, essential act that keeps the system functioning through the worst moments of the year. By first light, the storm has passed, or is passing. The valley floor is buried. The paths between structures are gone under half a meter of snow. The landscape is completely, silently transformed. And the first thing the family does, before eating, before warming themselves more thoroughly, before anything else, is open the pen. The sound that comes out of that pen when the beam is lifted is one of the most functional sounds in the human experience of mountain life. Dozens of sheep, warm and alive and impatient, moving toward the light. The family counts them again. Every animal that walked in the evening before has to walk out now. And when the count matches, when the last animal emerges blinking into the white morning and the tally is complete, the relief is not celebratory. It is quiet and deep and practical. The family has another day. The flock has another day. The year's work survives into the morning, but the morning brings its own set of challenges, and the herders know this before the storm is even fully over. The grazing ground is buried. The trails are drifted shut. The water sources are frozen solid. The animals need to eat, drink, and move. And the conditions that make all of that possible have been erased overnight. This is where the preparation that happened days and weeks before the storm becomes as important as everything that happened in the hours immediately before it. The fodder storage is central. In the Afghan mountain valleys, the weeks between the end of the autumn grazing season and the first major snowfall are not a period of rest. They are the most critical logistical window of the year. Every day of that window is spent cutting, drying, and stacking dried grass and plant matter against exactly this morning. The morning after the first blizzard, when the mountain is white and the animals need to eat, and there is nothing growing anywhere within reach. Families who cut enough fodder survive the deep winter with their flocks intact. Families who underestimated the coming winter, or who lost weeks of cutting time to illness or other emergency, face a brutal calculation by midwinter. Reduce the flock now to extend the feed, or risk losing the entire flock to starvation by February. This calculation, how many animals the available fodder can sustain through the expected length of winter, is performed mentally by experienced herders with a precision that would impress any logistician. They do not write it down. They hold it in their heads, cross-referenced against the body condition of each animal, the remaining quantity of stored feed, the likely date of spring snowmelt based on years of observation, and the current condition of the weakest members of the flock. It is a living calculation, updated daily, that governs some of the most consequential decisions these families make all year. And then there is the question of the path. After a major snowfall, the trail between the village and the high grazing ground, the same trail the sheep descended just hours before the storm, is buried. Before the animals can return to any grazing, even the wind-scoured patches where snow accumulation is thinnest, someone has to open the path. In many villages, this is communal work. Neighbors share the labor of clearing the main trail, distributing the physical cost across the community rather than placing it entirely on any single household. This cooperation is not altruism. It is infrastructure maintenance. The trail is shared capital. Every family depends on it. Every family contributes to it. The social structure of these communities, which can appear opaque or rigid from the outside, is in large part organized around exactly these practical necessities. There is a wider pattern here that takes time to see clearly. Everything in this system, the thick walls, the layered roof, the communal trail clearing, the fodder mathematics, the careful entry management, the midnight roof scraping, the clay pot of water by the warm wall, is not a collection of isolated survival tricks. It is a single integrated architecture of resilience. Each element compensates for the failure of something else. The thick walls buy time if the bedding layer thins. The fodder reserves compensate if the spring comes late. The communal trail maintenance compensates if a household loses a worker to illness. The experienced herder's ability to read the flock compensates if the sky gives less warning than usual. The system has redundancy built into it, not because anyone designed it that way in a planning session, but because every generation that failed to build in that redundancy did not survive to teach the next one. What we are looking at, in other words, is evolution. Not biological evolution, but cultural and technical evolution operating on the same principle. The strategies that worked got passed forward. The ones that did not got buried, sometimes literally, in the mountain winters of the Hindu Kush. What remains? What we see in action when a family moves their flock down a storm-darkened slope with quiet precision, when a stone pen holds warmth through a night that drops to -25, when a family emerges at dawn to count every single animal alive, is the distilled intelligence of hundreds of years of iteration. It does not look like engineering. It does not look like science. It looks like an old stone building and some tired people moving sheep. That is exactly what makes it so easy to underestimate. Before you go, we would love to know. What other remote communities, traditional shelters, survival systems, or forgotten ways of living do you want us to explore next? Leave your suggestion in the comments below. We read everyone. And if this story changed the way you see what survival actually looks like, subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. The yellow-gray sky over the Wakhan corridor will come again. It comes every year. And every year the families who have lived beneath it for generations will read it in the middle of the afternoon, rise from whatever they were doing, and set the system in motion. Not because they were told to, not because they consulted anything written down, but because they carry in their understanding of the world a precision about cold, about animals, about time and terrain and consequence that most people will never develop in the course of an entire lifetime. The storm is not the story. The preparation is, and the preparation is so old, so tested, so quietly perfect, that when the storm finally comes, there is almost nothing left to do except let it pass.